Welcome to this tutorial where we will be creating a game system. This time around we will be creating a stamina system. I want to note immediately from the get-go that it might as well just be a mana system or a health system or something similar, because they can all be used in very similar ways. But it is essentially a system where you regenerate a resource over time, and you also have the ability to add and subtract from it as well. So let's just show off what we're going to be creating and then get started. So this is what we will be creating today. It's a very simple stamina system that you can use. It's made in a blueprint component, so it's like modularized and separate from the character in such. But it does have communication with the character and with the user interface to make sure that all the information is being spread properly. So we have this bar in the top, which is updated depending on our stamina. We have some keys implemented that allows us to decrease and increase stamina at will to debug that the functionality works. You see that the stamina bar has a regen on it that keeps regenerating whenever the stamina is below 100. This regen can also be paused. So if we have a little bit less stamina and we walk in here, you can see that it's paused. This represents something like a state like you're in combat and you're not regenerating hit points or something like that. In this specific example, it is indefinite, so it will last until we get an explicit message saying to start regenerating again. However, it does have a variable on it, so you can actually specify a certain amount of time for it to stop before it starts again, for example. This volume that you're standing in right now represents being in combat, so leaving this cube will also allow us to resume the regenerating of stamina, and we can display that by walking out like this. And in addition to that, we also have the character. You can see that he's sliding around, and that's because he is in a flying state right now. And we also have set up the system with the ability to, if we reduce the stamina so far low that it gets to 0, then the character is no longer able to do something in like climb in Breath of the Wild, or in this case fly. So if we are to decrease it, we have one event dispatcher that says, oh no, stamina is low when we have gotten below 25% at some point, just to show that that's another way you can do it, or a similar way you can do it for something else. And then when we have reached 0, you can see that our character falls down and is no longer flying and can now jump around and walk around like normally again. So this is what we're creating in this system today. Here we are inside of Unreal Engine 4.26, and what we're going to be doing is quite simple. We're going to start off with creating a folder so we have something for our blueprints and such. So we'll call it blueprints, just to structure it somewhere. And what we want to do is we want to create a blueprint component to contain all of the logic for the stamina system. So we'll create a blueprint class. And we'll choose an actor component over here. Call it BPC stamina. We can now immediately go to our third-person character, and we can dock him over here, and we can add this component. So BPC stamina. There we go. You might not get a hit if you type it with an underscore. You can see it when you type in BPC, but underscore is not what it takes into account over here. But anyway, so this is our stamina system. So let's open up that stamina system. Now, normally when you have a stamina system, we're going to remove tick because we don't want to work with tick. It's good to try and avoid the tick at all times, of course. Normally when you work with a stamina system, you have some basic functionality. You have the ability to consume the resource, you have the ability of slowly regenerating the resource, and you can also have something like adding the resource in the shape of like potions or similar things. So what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to be adding some variables. We'll call one our current stamina, and we'll make it a float. And the reason we're choosing float is because we can have a value with more granularity than an integer. An integer can go from 120 to 119, but it can't go to 119.5, for example. Now, there's nothing wrong with having it as an integer either. That's perfectly fine. It's all up to you of how you want, what kind of precision that you want to have, if it's even necessary, and how you want to store the information. Either way, we're going to be adding another variable. We'll call it max stamina. So we have that available to us. In addition to that, we want to be able to manage these things. So we can start off with setting our max stamina to a value, any value really, like so. And then we can have as our begin play to make sure that our current stamina is being set to whatever the max stamina is, so that it's set to max to begin with. That way you don't need to deal with making sure you have populated it later and having it to the same amount as something else and things like that. By doing this, we have just contained all of that part, so you just need to update the max stamina when you want to have a different value for the stamina, essentially. So one of the first parts is we want to be able to affect this stamina value somehow, and we can do that by creating a function, and we can create this function and call it add stamina. I'm choosing to call it add stamina, but it could just as well be subtract stamina or something like that. It's all up to you in the way and shape you want to have your code work, right? Because an add stamina could just as easily be used for subtraction just by sending in a negative value. So what we'll do is we want to set the current stamina to something, and we can drag this parameter off here. So we have the pin in, so the current stamina is going to be this. It's not going to be this. This is just going to be the stamina change. So whatever value you're sending in here is what we will be adding to our current stamina. So we'll start off by doing that. We'll add float by float and have our current stamina as the input to that calculation. After that, we want to clamp this. So we'll clamp the float, making sure that this value can only go between certain intervals. So it can only go to the maximum of max stamina in this case and a minimum of 0. And after that, we actually want to set our stamina. And then that function is done and we can return. So that's short and sweet when it comes to the functionality of that. Now, the point of contention for stamina behavior is normally how do you solve the problem of having a regenerating stamina? And some would put it in tick, some would be doing other things like that. In my opinion, what we should do is something like we want to have a stamina that is regenerating a certain amount at a certain interval. So to make this, let's start off with creating a variable and we'll get back to why. So we'll call this our stamina regen interval. And let's say we want the stamina to regenerate every 0.1 seconds. So we'll set it to 0.1 over there. Then we'll create a function. So we'll create, or rather we can create a event here, a custom event. And then we can call this something like stamina regeneration. And this function in itself, or this event in itself, will handle the regeneration. How we call this is something that you might want to have. We need to have regeneration like ticking at all times to begin with. So what we want to do here is we want to create a timer event. So set timer by event, which creates the ability to have an event being called. So that's why we'll hook these together like this. After a certain time. And this time that we want to have is our stamina regen interval. Come on. like so. So we'll have that in there. But in addition to that, we also want to have this repeat. So we'll click in looping to make sure that this is happening over and over again, essentially. So what we have done now is we have said at the beginning of the play, we want to create a timer for an event. So every 0.1 seconds, we want this event to be called looping. So this will then be the event that actually handles the functionality for the regeneration. So we have a function here for adding stamina. So we can drag in here. And we want to add a certain amount of stamina per interval. So we could say something like stamina regen per second as our variable over here. So we could have some value like, let's say 10, meaning that we regenerate 10 stamina every 1 second. So this would be a value that we want to have in our calculation for here, but we don't know how long of a time it's been since this has been called. And we want to be able to have the opportunity to change the interval here to be something else. So what we want to do is we want to take the interval and we want to type in divide. And then we'll unhook the top one and make sure that it's inverse and set 1 as the top value. Now essentially what we're doing is we're considering this as 1 second divided by the interval, which is 0.1, meaning 10 times per second. So that is, actually let's make it simpler. Let's do it like this. Since this is the interval per second anyway, let's do it like this. We'll take this one and multiply it. This will be easier to observe, I believe, anyway. So stamina, you might want to change these two around. Might be making it easier from a readability perspective as well when it comes to what it's actually doing. So stamina per second multiplied by your regen interval will give us a value of now 10 multiplied by 0.1, meaning 1. So we'll get 1 stamina each time, and we'll call add stamina in here, like so. And that has essentially handled the regen that you want to have, but you want to have some more granularity when it comes to this. So one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we go over here to the set timer and we want to promote it to a variable. What this is doing is it's giving us a handle to our timer. So we'll call this the timer handle reference or something like that. Actually, that's kind of redundant. Let's call it timer ref. So that is our variable that we have to our stamina regeneration here now. Why would we want to do this? Well, there might be certain things, like let's say you're using this for hit points instead and you want it to regen hit points all the time except for when you're in combat, for example. So what you can do then is you can get this timer reference and you can type in timer and you can see we have pause timer by handle. Doing this will actually pause the timer, making sure that it won't happen for a period of time or until you unpause it, essentially. So we could do custom events and call this stop regen or something like that. And in addition to that, we can also make it start again. So we'll create another custom event. Start regen or restart regen, I guess. And we'll get the timer reference and type in timer and you get unpause timer by handle over there. So now we have that functionality as here, at least available to us, even though we're currently not using it. So now you might be thinking, well, that's all good and fine, but if you pause the timer by the handle, when do you know when to actually restart it again? Well, we could do something like this. We could add a time here. So we could give it a float and call it the stop time or something like that. Something that describes it. It's essentially going to be the time before it actually starts taking the regeneration again. And now what we could do is make sure that this happens in a reliable way. If you were to do something like delays, which I highly advise against using at all times, they have their function and their place and everything like that, but it tends to be that delays cause a lot of issues, and it's difficult to see why things are happening if you have a lot of them. So that's why I think that avoiding them is a good thing. So we're going to be finding a different way of handling this than delays. So what we can do here is we can actually use another timer event, and what we'll say is we want to have the restart regen event happen when this timer is called, and we want the stop time to be whatever we're sending in. And now this works, however you can get the issue of if a stop regen is called, that's supposed to stop you from regenerating for, let's say, 5 seconds. And then you let it tick for 4 seconds, so you have 1 second left before you start regenerating. And then something else happens, like you get into combat again or something like that. You still have a timer going on that's supposed to restart the regeneration in 1 second, but you probably don't want that to happen anymore now that this has been triggered again. So we'll set a variable here, promote it to a variable. We'll call this the restart regen timer reference. And essentially what we want to do is, if we actually have this one set, that means that we have possibly a timer going. And what we want to do then is make sure that that timer isn't actually working as it is right now. So we will do this. We'll drag one of these out. So we'll tell this one to invalidate. Clear and invalidate timer by handle. Should be clearing the time for it to activate this, meaning that it won't actually happen. It will be invalidated and out of, it will be deprecated sort of. So having that as a first step makes sure that we clear any existing ones. Then we'll make sure to pause the timer for the regeneration, so that doesn't happen while this is happening. And then we set a timer for whatever time we have sent in here now, since this will be overwriting whatever time is before. But in some cases you might not want to have it be limited to a certain time. You want to maybe have it indefinitely until a different event happens. So what we can do then to make that allowable is we can put in a branch. And we can say that if this is greater than 0, like so. So if we actually get the value in here, let's see how we can do this the prettiest. If we actually get a stop value time into this function here, then we're gonna use that for our timer here. If we do not get a timer set, so a timer that is of 0, then we're essentially saying, okay, we don't want to have this regen start by itself. So then you would have to program an event or something like that that would have to restart it manually, and that's why we have this available to us as well, like this. So let's clean that up like so. And we don't want this looping, we just want it to call once, and that seems okay, I think. So we'll be testing all of this out to see if I get everything right in the end, but for now let's continue. now might be a good time to make sure that we actually have a visual representation of our stamina. So let's create some very basic assets for that. To start off with, we'll create an interface. We'll call this W for widget underscore HUD, something like that. And we won't be making anything super fancy or anything like that. We'll just be making a very simple HUD. We'll type in progress bar and drag one of those out. This will be representing our stamina. We can drag it out a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. We can anchor it in the top middle, for example. We can reset the position of X and then make the alignment 0.5. And this will probably be fine for our purposes. In addition to that, we can also go down and see our fill color over here. Fill color is determined by percent here, so it fills up the more you have of percentage in this specific color. Stamina bars tend to be yellow, so we can try something yellow. In addition to that, you can also change other things like background color and fancy stuff like that. But for our purposes, we'll keep it really, really simple. You also have the ability to change like how we fill it and stuff. So this will be what we need to do. So some would say that you want to use this bind to keep this information updated. I would claim that's a bad idea. It's not performant because it does this every single frame and checks regardless if the stamina has been affected or not. So what we're going to do is something a little bit different. We are going to, first of all, we're going to name this progress bar something. So we're going to call it stamina bar. Maybe with a small b makes more I will keep it like that, that's fine. So what we want to do is we want to have a function here. Remove our tick, we can remove the pre-construct, and we'll say create a function called, an event called set stamina. And we'll give it an input, and we'll make it a float, and we'll say stamina bar value percentage, to make sure that this is a value that's supposed to be getting between 0 and 1 then, just like our percent value. So we'll get our stamina bar reference, type in set percent, and then just hook up the value to that. So now we have the functionality of actually setting this, but we're not actually setting it anywhere. So where would we do this? Well, we would do it likely in our third person character. So how am I thinking this could function is that we have our blueprint component stamina. It keeps track of our stamina. When a stamina has changed, it sends the information to the blueprint of the character. The character itself has some kind of user interface that represents the stamina or not. It's completely up to that specific project, right? But regardless, the person here, the character knows how to send this further. So the stamina blueprint component is communicating with the character because it knows of the character, and then it lets the character handle it however it wants, essentially. So a good way to do this could be if we create a blueprint interface to communicate this information. So we create a blueprint interface, go to BPI underscore stamina communication. And we'll just do it so that let's say new stamina value is the let's name it something better. Set stamina value might be better. So what we want for information in this is, among other things, we know that we want to have our percentage, but we want to have possibly more things than that. We can start off with the percentage though. So we'll type in, we want a float, and we'll type in stamina percentage. So this then, we will make sure to go to our third person character, class settings, implement the interface, because we want to use this from our stamina blueprint component and send it to our character. And when do we want to change it? Whenever we have added stamina, because add stamina is the function that's used in the stamina region, but also whenever we change it in some other way or form. Where have I? Oh, of course, it's a function over here. So as the very last part here, we can make sure to call that function. What we want to do is calculate our stamina in percentage. So this is easy enough. We have our current stamina and we have our max stamina. Our current stamina divided by our max stamina will give us a value that's between 0 and 1. Because if our current stamina is at max, then that's max divided by max essentially, which is 1. If our current stamina would be something like 0, 0 divided by max, whatever that is going to be 0, and then we're going to have values in between that. So we can just take our current stamina and divide this. Since this is our already clamped value, we'll take our max stamina, divide it like so, and then we'll make sure to send it to our character. The character is the one who has the blueprint component, so we get our owner from the component, and we get we send the information of set stamina value by message. So this is going to call our blueprint interface that we created with the value that we just have. And since we have it in our add stamina function, or we could have called it change stamina function or something like that, then this is going to be updating that at all times. So our third person character is going to get a message about that every time here now. So we'll go to interfaces and we'll right click and implement the event. So we get this event for that. Now the player character has to decide, or the third person character has to decide, what do I do with this information? And we do have our HUD that we've created, although we're not using it currently. We can go to our begin play if we're using a begin play. I don't think we are. So let's just add a begin play. And quickly create a widget and make it of the type WHUD. And then we can promote that to a variable. We call it our HUD reference. And then we can also add that to viewport. So now when we start, we're going to get the stamina bar added essentially, and we're creating a reference for it. Now that we have that reference, we can make use of it over here. And we can call on the function that we created earlier, which we called set stamina in this case. Set stamina is going to call this function, which in turn will handle the updating of the stamina on the actual widget. So let's try this out a little bit. Let's create some functions here, some very simple functions. So keyboard E. We can use this to increase our stamina, for example. So we'll type out a print saying stamina added and we'll get our blueprint component here, and we'll say add stamina, and we'll send in a value of, let's say, 10. So this would increase our stamina by 10. Let's create another event. Keyboard R. And let's say that this one decreases instead. So we'll copy this, and instead of saying stamina added, we'll say stamina subtracted. Then we'll call the same functions again here. But instead now we are going to be using a negative value here. So let's do -20. Like so. And let's see what happens when we play now. So we play, we have our stamina bar. Pressing 1 would increase it, pressing 2 would decrease it, so pressing 2. Nothing happens. I've obviously missed something. So let's debug that and see what that is happening because of. So let's start off with some debugging information. We can perhaps, let's do a print, regardless of which one of these we go through. We want to print out what our current stamina is. So get current stamina, and let's see what we get when we press some buttons. So we press 1. Okay, nothing's happening. Wait, I'm being an idiot. I put these for... Okay, in my mind I had mapped these to 1 and 2, but they're mapped to E and R. Let's try that again and actually press the right buttons. So E should increase it, and nothing is happening because we're already at max. So pressing R should decrease it, and you can see that it's decreasing, and also you can see that it's increasing because of the timer as well. Okay, so that's actually working. That's good, because I was starting to get crazy that what had I done. Anyway, so we have done some tests and see that it works, and that's great. What else can we do with this? Well, one of the things I would suggest is that our blueprint component that keeps track of stamina might want to inform its owner about certain conditions. Like, for example, when you're getting low on stamina, you might want to tell the player, or when you have run out of stamina completely, for example. So one way to do this is we can create an event dispatcher. And say when this stamina component is running out of stamina, then it will send that message. And then whoever is interested can listen to that message, or if they are not interested, then might as well not, right? So it's perfectly harmless. So we can say out of stamina as the event dispatcher over here, and compile and save, and we create input. And actually we don't need an input. If we're out of stamina, we're out of stamina. We don't need to specify anything about it. This is where I was. Save. But essentially now we created that. So how do we make use of this? Well, an event dispatcher, if you don't know already, is sort of like a mailing list. Whoever is interested in this message will get informed when this message is being sent. So whenever we have added stamina, that's when we have actually been able to change it. Then we can make a check. And we can say if current stamina is less than equal to 0, which it shouldn't be able to go below 0, but good to make sure anyway with checks. To have them not check against exactly 0, because you might get a rounding error or something like that, or just to be on the safe side. But we shouldn't be able to get even a rounding error with this system. So if this is less than equal to, if the stamina is less than or equal to 0, then we're gonna send our message. So we'll drag out down to stamina here. We'll click the call and say send this message. And after that it's going to return, and it's going to return also if it had not happened like that. So now we're going to get a message saying we're out of stamina, when that happens. And what we can do is on the third person character, we can make sure that we are listening to this message. We can do it in this example in begin play. So if we get our BPC stamina over here, and right click it, convert to a validated get, to make sure that it's a properly set one. And then we say bind, what did we call it? Event auto stamina, this one. So bind event to auto stamina. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room. And then we want to create an event for this. So we'll create a custom event and say out of stamina. So this event is what's called when we run out of stamina, for example. So this could be anything really, depending on your game. If you were making something like a flying game, maybe out of stamina means that you can't fly anymore. If you're having a game like Breath of the Wild, run out of stamina, you can't climb anymore if you're climbing. Things like if you were sprinting, then this will stop you from sprinting, and things like that. Also, in conjunction with this, it might be good to have like a certain if we run with the example, for example, with the sprinting, you might want to have a threshold number, like say you want to have at least minimum 15 of stamina if you want to attempt to try and sprint, so that you don't get this situation where you can like drain the stamina to 0 and then you get like 1 stamina and then you can sprint for like 1 stamina and things like that. Give it a little bit of a smoother feel to it if you have like a threshold that isn't immediately filled or fulfilled. Anyway, we can demonstrate this by having like a flying character, let's say. So if we were to set our movement mode, the character movement, and we say our movement mode is flying, for example, like so, then this should make us so that we are, okay, we're sliding around, we're not, but that's okay, because that means that we'll slide off this, right? So now we're currently flying and everything is fine. Then we say when we're out of stamina, we want to prevent you from flying anymore. So we'll copy this. And this could be climbing or anything else, just like I said before. So we'll set it back to walking here again. And again, this auto stamina message happens when the auto stamina is triggered from the blueprint component over here, which happens when we are at 0 stamina. And then when that event happens, we set our movement back to walking, which should cause us to fall. So let's try it out. And we are sliding around because we're flying, technically. And then we reduce our stamina. We are 80, 75, decreasing, and then you see we fell down and now we're running around normally, being able to jump and such, while our stamina is regenerating. Yeah, so that's a very good way of informing certain conditions, and you can have other conditions as well. You can have an event dispatcher that says low amount of stamina, something like that, and you could have that be a check, something like maybe you wanted it to be something related to a percentage, for example. So you wanted to check everything that's below a certain percentage would cause low stamina to flash as a text or something, let's say. So we have already calculated our percentage stamina here. We can bring that around and we can say if it's less than, like so, and let's say 0.25. So we have a condition here when the stamina is below 25%. Drag in our branch over here, like like so. Clean this up a little bit. So, and then we have our situation over here again. So when it's false, that means it's above 25%, so we don't want to do anything. Otherwise, we can call our low amount stamina, like so. And then we'll end that as well. Now this is a little bit unorganized, of course, but it's just to show something. Like so. And low amount of stamina, we can say that the character, we should probably be doing that. Let's give ourselves some space over here. And we'll get this one again, make a reroute node, and we'll bind event low amount of stamina. So, and then we'll make sure that this goes to another event. So we can click add event here, for example, add custom event. It'll get the interface of whatever you have defined up here, which we didn't have anything right now, but low stamina. So this is the event that's called when we have low stamina. And let's say we wanted to send some text to the HUD then. So we'll send, let's put in a text, like so. We'll put it over here. We'll make it blank. We'll call it stamina text. Click it to be a variable, like so. And then we go back to our third-person character, and we can just get our HUD reference, and we can say we want to set stamina text. That's not what we want to do. Okay, this is a little bit hacky, but bear with me. Get stamina text. We shouldn't really be doing it this way, but this is just to show something. You probably wanted to have, let's do it proper actually. Let's not teach you bad habits. So we'll go over here, create a custom event, for example, and set stamina text. No less too redundant and also confusing with the naming convention of the actual widget. Set stamina status text, and we'll have an input, and we'll make it a name, and we'll call it text. We'll get our stamina text over here. We'll type in set text, and actually it's not name, it is text that the variable type is called. So we can just plug it in like so without any conversions. Going back to our third person character, we can now say set stamina status. Isn't that what I called it? All right, we need to, sorry, we get the reference to the HUD. Set stamina status text. And from here we could set some kind of information like, oh no, stamina is low, for example. Okay, that's not how we spelled stamina. Like so. Compile, save, and when we play, we're flying around, reducing our stamina. Oh no, stamina is low. And whenever we reach 0, we fall down. So something like that. You can use event dispatchers in a good way to determine certain events happening in a system like this, and then whoever's interested can react on it in whatever means or way they want to. Yeah. That's all. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned a lot. Actually, never mind. We have one more thing we should actually show off and try and test, which is the regeneration actually stopping. over here in our event graph over here. So the stop regen and the stamina regen kicking in and such. We should, let's, best way to demonstrate this, let's see. Let's create a new blueprint, just to have something that symbolizes an event happening essentially. So we'll create an actor and say BP for blueprint and say combat volume. So in this we open it up, we create a box volume. It's not called box, it's called box collision, sorry. And we'll say this is the combat volume, and we'll compile and save, and we say hidden game to false, and then we'll click the on component begin overlap, and then let's create some helper functions as well. Let's create a blueprint interface and say PPI combat. And let's create a few methods in here. So start combat, and let's create another one called end combat. So, and in our blueprint component, our blueprint combat volume, let's also enable the end overlap over here. And let's say that whenever we enter this volume, we are entering combat. Whenever we're leaving it, we're leaving combat. So we'll take the other actor over here and we'll say start combat to it. And then if it has that blueprint interface implemented, then it'll do something. And end combat on the other one. There we go. Then the third person character here, we will actually implement that interface. So DPI combat. So, and we'll say that implementing the event for start and implementing the end. And for the end, we can do something very simple. We can drag out the stamina system. We can say restart regen, for example. This means that whenever we leave the volume, we will start regenerating again. If we start combat, for example, we can get the system and we can say stop regen, and then we get a certain amount of time. So let's say we put in 3 seconds in here, like so. And then we want to go to our combat volume and probably expand the volume a little bit, I'm gonna assume. So we'll scale it a little bit. That didn't work at all. There we go. Let's see what that looks like in the world. We'll put our, sorry, that's the wrong thing. There's our blueprint. That's a very small combat blueprint volume, but that'll do. Let's also put in some debugging information, because it's always good to have. So print, and we'll say entering combat. We'll print over here saying leaving combat. Right, so now we've handled all of this, I think. Let's try this out then. So, okay, it's gonna be a little bit jarring with the sliding, but anyway, so we'll decrease it a little bit so we're not full, so we can see it actually freeze if we enter here. So we'll reduce this a bit, we walk in, we see that, okay, that's bad. So we're inside here and we can see that it's frozen, and now it started again, but because 3 seconds has passed. We're leaving, we get in here, try to stay in here, you see it's frozen, it starts again. However, if we go in there, it will freeze, and then if we leave immediately, it will start again, you can see. So the different timers for handling the stopping of regeneration seems to be working as well, which is good. Although we could have made this volume a little bit bigger, I think. So let's make it something like 4 times. That would have been easier. So now essentially everything seems to be working. So to recap a little bit then, we have created a blueprint stamina system, which has the functionality of first setting the max stamina to the current stamina to the same value as max stamina, and then creating a timer to regenerate our stamina. We're saving a handle to that timer so that we can manipulate it later. And we're saying that this event should be called by the timer that's called the stamina regen, which is sent every 0.1 seconds. Every 0.1 seconds we will be adding stamina of a certain value. That value is our stamina regen per second multiplied by the interval that we are actually updating our stamina with in this function. So multiplying those two, we're sending them into the add stamina function. The add stamina function is the function that is like the meat and bone for everything. Everything uses this, so everything gets updated here. So we get the change. If it's a positive value, we add it to our stamina. If it has a negative value, it will be subtracted instead. And then we clamp that calculated value between 0 and the maximum stamina, so it can't get past 0 or can't get past the max. After that, we set our current stamina to whatever value we calculated. Then we divide the current stamina by max stamina to make sure that we have our stamina in percentage, so that we can send it to our character via interface, which in turn, where did it go? Set stamina value, come on, focus, there. Which in turn will send the same stamina value to a function in the HUD called set stamina, which updates the element of the progress bar percentage for that value. Coming back to the component again, after we have done that, we also check if our current stamina is less or equal to 0. If it is, we send the event dispatcher saying that we're out of stamina. If it is not less or equal than 0, then we instead check if it's currently less than a quarter of our maximum stamina available. If it is, we send another dispatcher saying that we're low on stamina. If that hasn't happened, we just continue as normal. So, in addition to that, we also have the functionality of stop regen, which allows us to, by creating a timer to a different function, we first check if we have a value that is above 0. We didn't actually check this functionality, but it should work. We could check it. We'll do it afterwards. So if we have a value that's greater than 0, then that's how long it will be before we call this function, which will then unpause it again. So it will be paused for as long, paused as long as that value that we're sending in time. And to make sure we don't get anything about like an old timer still running and that finishing and stuff like that, we always invalidate the handle of our timer for the restart region, which we get over here if there is one to invalidate, to make sure that only the latest one will be active. There could be some consideration done if the stop time is like larger than whatever is currently being timed, something like that, make a comparison and then have that logic, but we haven't implemented it currently here. Anyway, when this event is called, it will call the unpause again, so we restart our functionality. And then we have implemented this volume, which has the very simple functionality of just sending an information of it has entered combat or left combat, and that is implemented in the third person character, which says that if it enters combat, if I can find it, it will stop the regeneration for 3 seconds. And if we leave the combat, it will immediately restart the regeneration, so we don't have to wait for this to finish. In addition to that, we also implemented some keys for actually manipulating the stamina just for convenience sake. And that should be everything that we've implemented, I think. Yeah, so let's try this out and see if this works. So if we were to set the stop time to 0 here instead, we should not have it actually restarting at all. So the stamina should be frozen. So let's reduce it a bit. We walk in here, it's frozen. We wait some seconds. We can see that 3 seconds has passed. It's still not moving back up again. So we need to actually call it manually, which we do by leaving combat. So then it starts regenerating again. Yeah. Now we're done. Good job watching the whole way through. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.